So we'll just give a minute or two for people to join. And then so shall we make a start, Chris, as we have a packed agenda?
Yeah, brilliant. Do you want to kick us off then, Renee? Do you want to tell us about Talent Grader?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. So good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. It's really great to have you all with us today. And I'm Renu from Talent Grader, founder of the company. And Talent Grader is a dedicated assessment platform that supports SMEs, HR, and recruitment professionals to find valid and reliable talent assessments easily. And we're also an outsourced recruitment partner for SMEs. So guest speaker for today is Chris Platts from Thrive Map. Before I hand you over to Chris, just a couple of housekeeping stuff. So this session is being recorded and it will last for 15 to 20 minutes. And can I ask everyone to use the Q&A function to ask your questions throughout the session? And I'll read the questions to Chris at the end. And Chris has very kindly agreed to share the slides with you. So I'll be following up with the slides and the recording. So don't worry about making notes. Just sit back, enjoy a cup of tea or coffee or a drink, and just enjoy listening to Chris. So next slide, please, Chris. I've never asked a guest speaker to do the slides for me, so thank you for navigating.
That's all right.
So Chris is CEO of Thrive Map, and Thrive Map specializes in designing personalized pre-employment assessments geared towards volume hiring. Being a former recruiter himself, he understands the challenges of real-world recruitment and also problems of relying on making hiring decisions based on intuition. And I was speaking to Chris earlier about work simulation exercises and how the realistic work simulation exercises can actually give candidates a real world experience of what the job is like. So it gives them great understanding to understand what the role is like, what is expected of them, and the culture of the organization. So both organization and candidates get that opportunity to understand if they are a good fit for each other. Without further ado, over to you, Chris. Thank you so much for coming. And
thanks, Renu. Yeah, well, I'll pass over to you at the end. So yeah, great. As Renu's introduced me, I'm Chris from Thrive Map. I'll be taking you through things today. For those that are new to Thrive Map, we create, as Renu said, real-world online assessments. They take candidates through a digital day in the life of a job, and they really kind of aim at providing two main purposes. The first is to enable companies to make better hiring decisions, and the second is to help candidates understand if the role and culture will be a good fit for them ahead of joining. So what are we going to be covering off today? So how do you know if you're ready for a pre-hire assessment? What to look for in an assessment partner, the metrics to look for and track, and how to sell in the business case. And if you're still with me at the end, I'll share some helpful resource links for you to work out the possible ROI of introducing assessments into your hiring process. But first, I want to take you through why we need better assessment methods than CVs or resumes in volume hiring. Well, the first reason is CV sifting is really time consuming. We did some research on this last year. Recruiters spend an average of 9 hours a week processing job applications and sifting CVs. Applicants per vacancy has increased across the board, but it's more than doubled in some areas since COVID. That's set to get quite worse for many sectors. But interestingly, research shows that up to 50% of the time spent on phone screens is actually recruiters explaining the job and the culture to candidates. This makes the hiring process far longer than it needs to be. The current average time spent acquiring talent in the UK, I think slightly lower in the US, is 36 days. But ultimately, hiring is just really inefficient, and assessments can help truncate the hiring process considerably. Second reason why we need to replace CVs in the hiring process, particularly for high volume hiring, is that resume sifting is biased, and various academic studies have proven this. I won't go into the details of these studies, but what's interesting here is that they're all CV based studies, identical CV studies. So what that means is basically the same CV is submitted, but with different names. So the MIT University of Chicago study sent 5,000 identical resumes, half with white sounding names, half with non-white sounding names, and 50% increase in interviews for people with white sounding names. Again, the same CV, Adam, got 3 times more interviews than Mohammed. And a really interesting study in Spain across over 1,000 different job types. The same CV but with a different gender. So men were 42% more likely to get invited in for an interview. Expect this problem to get more focus, I think, in the coming kind of 12 months. As a highlight on recruiter bias, that's not going to go away. The last reason we need to move away from CVs and to assessments is that CV sifting is actually ineffective. It's not very predictive as a method. The biggest study ever conducted on selection validity shows that experience is unlikely to be useful when predicting performance. It has a 0.18 coefficient. Education is even lower at a 0.1, which is only slightly better than random chance. Now, obviously, this is hugely varied based on the role type you're hiring for. Some roles that are slightly more senior, a CV will be more predictive. Roles that are low expertise, a CV is even less predictive than the numbers we're looking at here. So what are the most predictive assessment methods? Well, the most one is kind of a work sample test. So it's very much underpins our philosophy at Thrive Map that behavior should be tested via real life scenarios and tasks online. But interestingly here, we also enable organizations to conduct structured interviews. A lot of our assessments include job knowledge tests as a proxy for commitment, and it includes things like general cognitive ability elements provided there within the context of the job. So what happens when you combine these methods is that actually the whole kind of predictability of the assessment method improves, which is obviously great for our customers. So how do you know you're ready for assessments? That's the question we're getting to here. Well, there's 3 main triggers that we see companies kind of deciding to look at assessments. The first one is they want to save time in the hiring process. That could be because you're getting overwhelmed with job applications, or you just see an opportunity to streamline the hiring process, especially for jobs where asking for a CV doesn't make sense. The next is around hiring consistency and wanting to improve that element, and that could be to reduce bias, or it could be to improve new hire diversity, and then most importantly perhaps reducing new hire failure and improving new hire performance, and that can be something quite specific here, including improving your speed to productivity or ramp up time. That can have a huge knock-on effect in terms of costs in your business. So if any of these are on your radar, you really should be looking at how assessments can help. Okay, so we've kind of discussed how to know you're ready for assessments. What should you be looking for in an assessment provider? Obviously, that's difficult for me to answer, given I'm an assessment provider. So let's see what the evidence shows. So we did some research in 2018. It feels like a different world then, but we think it still holds true. 45% of candidates have had a negative experience with traditional assessments like psychometrics. Of those, the top reasons were that they felt they took too long, it was unclear as to why they were being asked to take in the first place, and that the assessment itself didn't relate to the job they were doing, which is a really big problem. Another interesting stat we uncovered in this research was that actually 1 in 2 people have left a job because the reality of that job was different to how they expected it to be. And a further 31% had actually left a company because the culture was different from how they expected it to be. This is really interesting, and our assessments aim to close that gap between expectations and reality. So what do candidates want from assessments? It's a really important question you should be asking. They want an assessment with an appropriate length. Now, really that depends on the role you're using the assessment for. If it's an entry-level hire, we recommend no longer than 15 minutes. If it's a CEO, 15 minutes would feel trivial. So appropriate length is really what's important. Candidates want assessments that are role relevant, that are contextual. The big complaint comes when candidates can't link the assessment they're being asked to take with the job they're actually going to be doing. and then transparently scored. So if you're asked by a candidate why they were selected for interview or not, based on their assessment data, then you have to show a clear path from the assessment question to the job relevant attribute to the scoring output. Anything that's unable to provide that level of transparency, you're going to find candidates are going to want to perhaps kind of explore that further, maybe even take litigation out against you, which has happened in multiple businesses recently. AI is particularly problematic in this area because true AI is black box and it can't provide that level of transparency. But it's not all about candidates, obviously, it's about companies too. So here are some questions for you to consider when choosing an assessment partner. One decision to make is whether you want an assessment to be a decision aid or a decision maker. A decision aid, you can't really put as a hard filter there. You're not going to save time. In fact, it may increase the amount of time spent in the hiring process. A decision maker can be used as a hard filter. Obviously, you're going to save time there. And really the answer to that question depends on what problem you're trying to solve and usually what role type you're looking to create an assessment for. Decision aids can be helpful for low volume, high expertise roles, middle manager level and above, etc. Decision maker assessments are better for low expertise, high volume hiring. The next consideration is whether you need a standardized test or a customized one. Now, standardized tests can be quicker to deploy, but they're not recommended if you want assessment to be a decision maker. The main reason for that is that they're not customized to how work happens in your business. So it means you're also going to be reliant on the test provider's definition, not your own definition of those attributes, probably not the same. You're reliant on generic assumptions about candidate behavior rather than practical examples of how behaviors and skills kind of appear within your organizational context. You're usually reliant with standardized tests on psychometric theories, for example, Jungian models or Big Five, which were developed over 50 years ago. The kind of exceptions to that would be on hard-skilled kind of coding tests. I think standardized tests are the way to go for those assessments, and they're intrinsic to the nature of the job. If you think a customized assessment is the way to go, then you'll want to know whether your assessment partner can provide you with data and analytics on what's leading to success in your business, whether you can make changes to the assessments as roles evolve, as you learn more about the jobs you're hiring into, and hopefully your partner should be able to provide you with that information. And finally, the next kind of question on this area is whether you believe behavior is dependent on context or not. I mean, that's a fundamental distinction. Non-contextual assessments are, generic tests like an IQ test or a cognitive ability test or personality psychometric. That also includes game-based assessments as well. More often than not, they're non-contextual. Personally, we believe that things only exist in context. So, kind of the neglect of context really is the main mistake companies make when using assessments. People behave differently in different contexts. That kind of area of psychology called ecological validity is unavoidable. So you can obviously come to your own conclusions on that. And lastly, it also depends on your adoption model. So we see companies adopting assessments in 3 different ways at ThriveMap. Reform, which can be done with either a contextual or non-contextual assessment. That's ultimately where you're using assessment data alongside CV information or other information gleaned in the hiring process to make a better selection decision. It's augmenting that hiring decision. Replace, which is where assessments can be a decision maker and used as a hard filter. So that has to be contextual. It has to provide a clear link between the score and the actual task on the job. And that can replace CVs in the hiring process. We see many companies not using CVs anymore, or certainly maybe using CVs at a later stage in the hiring process. But as experience is not an indicator of performance in the vast majority of volume roles, the CV really isn't required. And the last area is about reimagining, which a lot of companies here are going the extra mile and they're actually going to no interview hiring. They're just hiring people based off their assessment score. We've seen Amazon do this in the UK with their warehouse recruitment. And really is the next evolution from replace. So those are your considerations when choosing an assessment partner. What should you be tracking to demonstrate success or an ROI once your assessment partner has been selected? So the important thing here is that your metrics are really tied to your business outcomes. It depends on what those outcomes should be. Preferably they're board level priorities. Next, you've got to communicate in a way that kind of really lands. So most CEOs really only care about two things. They care about talent, loosely defined as hiring the best people and creating a great culture. And they believe in profit, which is keeping the company running, minimizing downtime, and avoiding talent gaps. Showing your CEO that your assessment is optimizing for both of those things, talent and profit, is going to be critical to landing any budget. And actually, you want to be demonstrating success against those key metrics if you can. So next, once you've kind of got an assessment partner in place, you're going to want to introduce a blind study, I would recommend, and that's going to test the predictability of the assessment. Now, a blind study would be where you test all candidates, but you don't use any of that data in your hiring process for a period of maybe a couple of weeks or a month, depending on how actively you're hiring, obviously. The question you're looking at there is, did assessment scores correlate with selection decisions? At that very basic principle, if your assessment isn't predicting people who you would have got on to hire, then you've really got to question why that assessment is in place in the first place. So we'd recommend doing a blind study. The next thing is leading indicators. So leading indicators will be things like assessment completion rates, candidate sentiment analysis, recruitment funnel diversity. Again, it's got to be tied to your business goals, but you could see those things very early on after your assessment has gone live. Your post-hire outcomes, though, are really where you're going to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of your assessment, and across three areas. So the time saved, and you can look at sifting time saved, screening time saved, total interview time difference, conversion rates from screen to interview to offer, etc. New hire retention, so normally 30-day, 90-day, 12-month retention, and new hire performance, and that can be looked at overall performance rating, if that's an objective measure, or hiring manager net promoter score, was it a good hire, etc. Did they pass their probationary period? There's lots of different ways you can chop that up. It really important from this that you have kind of targets in mind when you set out on your project, and you can attribute a cost to achieving those targets. That's going to be the fundamental to actually the business case, which is the next point. So there are a couple of links that will be helpful for you when kind of trying to work out that business case and the possible ROI of assessment use. And these are a time save calculator. The URL there will take you to it. You can input your own data on number of vacancies, number of applicants, etc. you get per vacancy, and you will get an overall calculation of how much an assessment is going to save you in terms of time. The second free calculator for you to use, again, is via that URL, and that is calculating the cost, the true cost of failed hire within your business. Again, you get to edit that, put in your specific data, and it provides you information on things like opportunity costs, productivity losses, etc. So in summary, we've covered off how to know you're ready for a pre-hire assessment. Really, if you're facing problems like hiring bias, high attrition, or high applicant volumes, or if you're looking to improve new hire performance, hiring consistency, or new hire diversity, then hopefully those are trigger points for you to really take assessments seriously. We've showed you the research that candidates say they want from an assessment provider, as well as some key questions for you to answer about how and where your assessment will be used. And we've distinguished between contextual and non-contextual assessments, customized versus standardized assessments, and that assessments really need to only measure job relevant characteristics. Next, we've explored some of the metrics you may want to track to first identify whether your assessment is valid, and secondly, to assess whether it's proving and achieving your desired hiring outcomes or not. And lastly, we've just briefly touched upon how to build a business case and communicate that business case to your CEO and exec team. So that's it from me for a whistle-stop tour. Thank you for listening. I'm going to hand back over to you, Rennie.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chris. You've actually taken us through such great insights in record time as well. So really thank you, and very clear in terms of the metrics that organization needs to look to measure and how they can put a business case forward for senior leadership team. So lots of great insights there. And one thing that kind of made me think was one of the things, there are lots of thought-provoking researches there, but one of the things was how far we've come by just accepting CV as part of recruitment and selection process. And to even think about no interview hires is like a radical idea for me, but it's but no doubt there are benefits to it, and especially to drive inclusion and diversity. I think that would be great. So thanks a lot for taking time to take us through that. And so then in terms of the next steps, just conscious of the time, so I'm just going to go quickly to the next steps. Sure. If you would like ThriveMap to be part of your journey, so as part of your volume hiring needs, please get in touch with Chris, who would be more than happy to give you a demo of what they do and how they've helped their clients so far in terms of designing realistic workplace work sample exercises. So that's it from us today. Thanks a lot for joining, and I hope you found the session useful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.